Hi, it's David Shummy here, and I just wanted you to get a quick look at the Logan Compact Elite Cutter. Now, this is a new one, straight in the box, and we're just going to open it up and have a little look at what's inside it. I've always used the Logan 301s, the old machine, and this is one that has replaced that now. And the Elite version supposedly comes with a squaring arm of some sort. So let's have a look and see what's in the box. Okay, when we open it up, we've got at one end a new type of straight cutter. Other end there we've got the traditional Logan 2000, although now it's got a pivoting action. Inside here we've got a squaring arm attachment by the look of things. Let's see how we can get that out. Oh, if we loosen this off. So there's a measuring arm. Oh, now that hinges up. Let's just get that out of there. And inside there, there's some other things with instruction manual, one in English, one in French, and a measuring stop and some other bits. We'll have a look at that in a sec. But here we have the tool. Now this is a Logan Compact Elite mat cutter. It's got a scale, much like the older model, although the older model had a longer bar here, but this is able to move and adjust the size for the width of your matting. And there's a little, there's a measuring stop on here too, which is obviously to stop the length of cut, which is quite a new feature to me. I haven't seen that before on a small machine. So it looks like Logan is starting to combine the features of professional straight line cutters in their basic models. And this is now a hinge, whereas before it was a spring-loaded piece. It's now a hinge mechanism. There's a little pin there. Okay, that pins in, and we've actually got a measuring bar here that we can obviously use. I can't see that actually screws on in any way. It just seems to sit down in the machine, and there is a little right angle bar actually just here underneath this hinge. We've got a little bar, so I'm assuming that this is going to be a right angle to the machine itself. There are ways of adjusting squareness, but usually Logan's pretty good when they come out of the box. Most things are usually pretty right. We're going to try this straight up. I think in order to use this for trimming, we would have to take our measuring arm off, and it's quite easy to take that arm off, and you can always put it on again later. Now, I'm just going to grab a bit of mat board. We'll pop it in the machine. Okay, now it's always important when you're cutting in any of these machines that you put a waste piece into the machine so that you protect the board you're cutting on and also protect the machine itself. So what we're going to do, put a straight blade in here. Hopefully there's some blades in this box. There we go. Oh, also, there's a little instructional DVD in the box there. You can watch our videos on how to cut mats, but in here there is an instructional DVD that covers all of Logan's cutting tools. And there's some other scales here. So I'm in Australia, so they've actually sent us the metric version. So in here there is some optional scales in imperial. If you're buying this machine overseas, you may find that the optional scales are actually the metric ones. But in this case, here are the imperial ones. So if I wanted to work in inches, I could just remove these and pop them onto the machine. And they've also given you a slip sheet here, which is the piece of board to go in that cutter. But the best thing to do is to keep bits and pieces of mat board that you're using, keep all the offcuts, because the offcuts are what you put in that machine to protect your mat board. So anyway, let's have a quick look and we'll just see how this machine squares up. I always like to get a tool out and just have a look at it straight new out of the box before there are any adjustments made to it. That way you can tell if the tool's a good tool. I've always found over the years that a lot of my students get a great success with most of Logan products. The only problems they really have is they tend to, when they start out, they might get an actual, the cheaper model rather than the best model. And I'd encourage them, or I'd always encourage anybody to buy a better tool if they can afford it. Now I think this plate must come off. Let's have a look. Does this sit on the outside there, or does it sit inside? I think it must sit inside, so this is a new actual fitting to me. So that little metal plate there comes off, and we've got a threaded bar. I've got my finger on the other side. Actually, it doesn't fall off. There is a little keeper collet there that stops that falling out. So then that goes through the centre of the blade. You then put your bar back on top, and you put your little nut back on to hold the blade in place. Now there's a couple of settings that it has on the side here. It says that it's got 3/16 or 3mm foam board and standard mat board. So we can cut, we can actually cut a couple of different sizes. We can cut 5mm foam board, and we can cut here standard mat board. So today I'm going to use standard mat board, so I'm just going to lock that. There's a little catch. I'm going to lock that down in. So now that straight cutter is set to cut standard mat board. This looks like it's a high impact plastic. They used to make these from metal, which is probably something that I would be concerned about, but we won't judge it until we've actually seen it cut. Some of the nylons and things work quite well. Often when you're putting a cutter onto a machine, like if this runs on here, now that's pretty fluid, but a little tip is you can always spray this with Mr. Sheen or some WD-40 or Inox, and those lubricants, those dry lubricants, work really well at making this cutter work even better. Just be careful though to not get any of that lubricant on your mat board. You know, you're better off spraying a little bit on a cloth and wiping the cloth on this track, and you know, you can lubricate those blocks that are going to run on the machine there. So we've got our straight cutter. What I want to do is I just want to throw in a board quickly and see if it's easy to square it up, because I'm not going to try a size here, I just want to see what happens. So I can put my board hard up against this measuring bar that's here. Make sure it's in a line. And in fact, I'm going to try it without the slip mat, and the reason for that is we're only cutting it straight, and I want to see how the quality of the cut is. I guess we're going to have to take that measuring stop off for straight cutting. Okay, so the board, I generally don't cut in one go, although I think they probably want you to have a go at one go. I tend to come along and cut gently and then come back and have another go at it. The reason for that is I like to get better life out of my blades by just gradually going over the tool or over the machine. Now that's cut off a strip. If you're going to use this for squaring, you would then rotate it clockwise and put the next part of the board up against there. So this time I'm just going 3 times there. So now this corner should be a right angle. What we'll do, we'll quickly set something up here and have a quick look. I like to give it a quick test, so I'm going to use, say, we'll set it here at 400 millimeters. That's if my board's big enough. Actually, I can't do 400. What I'm going to do, I'm going to come back in and we'll do 300. And the reason for that is that this squaring bar will not allow me with the offcut that I've got there. Now on professional machines, the squaring arm is actually on this side of the machine. So this may be something to watch out for. It's good if you're cutting off a big sheet of board, but if we're trying to trim this and use this squaring bar, it could be awkward to square a large piece where you've only got a little bit left over on this side. So this might be one drawback of this machine. Anyway, up against the piece, I'm going to keep it hard on the squaring bar and up to the measuring stop. So I've set it at 300. I'm trying to keep it here hard on the measuring bar. and then we come in and we'll cut that off. So I've cut that at 300. What I'm going to do is pivot it around, and we'll come in and we'll cut it at 200. And the reason for that is, again, my board here is not really big enough in order to trim a little bit off, because that squaring arm is on that side. So again, there's one small drawback there, but we'll soon test whether this machine is truly square with this squaring arm. In my framing classes, I always teach people how to square up board using a diagonal method and a normal ruler. So having a squaring arm is something that can be a good thing, or using a set square can be a good thing, but knowing how to measure if something is square is really important too. So we'll check that in a minute. So now I've cut my board 300 by 200, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab a tape measure. So we're going to put this on here and just have a look first of all. 300, 200. I want to check it from the 100 millimeters, because you can never be reliant on the end of your tape measure being 100% accurate. So if I come in and I measure that, actually that's good, that's precisely 300 millimeters. And actually this way is precisely 200 millimeters, so that's quite good. Now, most people would think, okay, I've used the squaring arm, that is square. Well, I like to check, and the way you check is you measure the diagonals. So if your board, first of all, is parallel, and you have measured both ends, and it measures as a parallelogram, to check if it's a right angle, you measure the diagonals. So I'm going to put my 100 millimeters right on the corner and come across and measure to this diagonal. It's a little bit tricky, but from corner to corner this measures 360 millimeters. We'll just check the other way. Corner to corner there, 360. So yes, the little squaring bar is accurate. But as I said, you have to have a little bit of board hanging over on this side to be able to use it. You couldn't just use it to trim a small piece unless you're just drawing the measurement on the board. So there is another method that you can use. Say we just had to trim a little bit off this and I wasn't going to use this measuring stop. What I could do with my tape measure is actually measure up and mark it at 290 millimeters, for example, if I had to trim 10 off. So say I'd made this wrong and I just had to cut a little piece off, I could actually make a measurement on the board, put it back into the machine, and then align that line up with the edge of the rail. Now this is something I want to check as well, to see how close this blade cuts to the edge of that rail. So we'll have a quick look and we'll see how good we go. So that's pretty much cut right on my mark there. Just going to have another quick check. 290, 290. So if you've got to trim a little bit off, use a pencil and a tape measure. If you're going to cut a large piece off, you can actually use this measuring bar that they've fitted now to the machine. So all in all, I'd rate this quite a good machine for the home hobbyist. It will do works up to 32 inches or 815 millimeters long. That is the size of the width of a piece of mat board. The standard mat board widths come 40 by 32 inches. Or just a little bit over a metre by 800. So if you wanted to cut a bigger mat with this machine, you could do it. It's difficult to trim down a larger mat, but in terms of cutting the window, it's very easy, because when you've got this measuring arm, or measuring bar I should say, on the tool, that is going to set the width of the machine. If we had a very large mat in there, we could actually set this, say we'd set this to 60 millimeters, and we were going to cut a very large piece. what would happen, that piece could stick out the end of the machine, and then we could shunt it, along on that measuring arm in order to cut longer than the length of the machine. So all in all, Logan has kept a few features. It's a little bit awkward. Oh, this measuring bar here, great. Okay, that would worry me. If you wanted to cut longer, and if this piece was in the way there, you couldn't slide your board through the machine, but I've just been able to pull that straight out. So all in all, I think this machine is as good as the old 301. It has quite a few good new features, like it is hinged rather than spring-loaded, so you can lift that right up out of the way. There's a rubber grip strip underneath. The measurement seems quite accurate here. It also now has that right angle measuring device. And what we'll do, we'll just quickly, I'm not used to using the actual measuring stop here, but we'll have a quick look and see how they've set that up. So if I just set that at 50 millimeters, I'm going to put my scrap board back in there. I'm going to get the squaring arm out of the way. I don't really need it in the way there. If I put my board in, and I'm just going to cut 50 mil all round, we'll just have a quick test cut. I'm used to drawing this. Now they may have adapted this tool now to have a starting point. There was that little measuring device, and I'm curious as to how the other end of the device works. So if I was to set that there to, I'm just flying here, I'm not going to actually, so if that's 500 there, and we had our board right down in this corner, let's just have a look. Okay, so that's given me a starting point. So I can come into here. So it's a bit like a production stop. Need to pop a blade in there. Always be careful when you're popping the blades in that you're just putting one in. Sometimes the inhibitor that they put on these blades sticks them together, and that would be one of the mistakes that people have made over the years, is they've put two blades into the cutter and then they wonder why they get a rough cut. But yeah, this is pretty simple. Blade in, blade comes out when you pivot that down with your thumb. Underneath is a blade adjustment depth. I'm not going to touch anything because normally when they come out of the factory at Logan, these are set to standard mat board. If you're cutting thicker mat board, by all means you can adjust that depth there. Bear in mind, the deeper you put the blade, the more chance there is of flex, and if the blade flexes, you end up with a curved cut. So generally, I don't touch this too much, but if I've got, say, if I'm using rag mat, it might just be a difference of 0.1 or 0.2 of a millimetre. I would give that grub screw in there just a quarter to half a turn to allow the blade to go slightly deeper. Anyway, let's have a quick look. We're up against the stop. There is no stop on the finishing line, but there is a good guide mark here, and so I'm going to push along until I get to the guide mark. This is something that's new on these Logan machines now, is they've actually added 3 lines, or more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines there, which enable you to gauge your start and stop line better. You know, sometimes the cuts are not exactly right, and you might over time work out that, oh, it's better to use the second stop mark or the first stop mark. Now I'm just pivoting that blade around each time, sticking it up against the cutter. And we'll do a little test here. Sometimes these don't drop out, and as a framer it's actually good that they don't drop out. You're better off undercutting than overcutting. Okay, oh, and now it has dropped out. So when I have a look, wow, pretty good, no overcuts. And this is another little thing, we'll just have a quick look and see one thing. Now that board, it came out this way. So if the squaring was perfect, and if my cutting was perfect, I should be able to take this board out and turn it around and see if it'll go back in. Now there is a tiny hair's breadth, but really that is pretty square. Like, if you're being tested as a picture framer, there is a tolerance allowed of 3 millimeters per meter of diagonal. So it's basically 0.3% over the length of that cut. So for something like this, that would be considered square by picture framing standards. So all in all, Logan Compact Elite, a great cutter if you're starting out doing picture framing, and I highly recommend it. If you want to find out more about picture framing equipment, visit framingequipmentreviews.com.